Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris for a new segment which I'm going to call Park Bench Moments. At least that's the title for now. I might change it later on. Interesting, I found a park where there was nobody at, and suddenly everybody and their brothers walking through here. The only place where I can find a decent park bench to sit on is right here in a park where suddenly everybody's walking their dogs and they're all stopping to look over to see what it is I'm up to. I'm quite the attraction here by doing my park bench moments. But anyway, back to the point. So the purpose of this park bench moment is to discuss something that's interesting here in the United Kingdom. So I was at yesterday's game, before I got today's game, USA and Samoa. And at that game, I spoke to a few different people, and one of the things I mentioned is that it's interesting here in the UK that suddenly I'm seeing the St. George's Cross flag, the English flag, and the Union Jack flying all over the place. Now, the lady who I said that to, obviously politically to the left, based on a reaction, when I said that, she kind of cringed and said, "Oh, well, that's, you know why that is." And what she didn't say, the unspoken words, is that says evil, racist, white people who don't like others. So she didn't have to say it. It was pretty obvious that's where she's going. And rather than have a confrontation with someone, because I was just mentioning, because she asked me about my trips to the UK, I was just mentioning that something that's different this trip than previous ones is seeing all these flags. She interjected and said that our friend who was there, another person who was wearing a Viking beard, he works for the city and has to remove those flags. I said, no, I'm not talking about the flags that you find on top of the light poles and the bridges that people are erecting. I'm talking about the patriotism that I'm suddenly seeing in England for English flags flying on flagpoles and properties, hanging off of people's homes, that sort of thing. That's something I've never really experienced in 35 years of coming to the United Kingdom. It's an interesting development to say there, at least from my perspective anyway. So I think that that was quite fascinating, but of course she decided that this was all about something quite different. It was all about people being bigots and racist. And now I'm just getting an audience here, so let me pause for a moment. Anyway, as I said, I found a park that I've been to previously where nobody ever comes to, and suddenly everybody and their brothers showed up in this park. So anyway, back to my story. So she obviously didn't like it, and she doesn't like those people. Now, I'm going to go back to a topic I talked about many years ago, and that's Brexit. When Brexit came about, years before it was ever passed and enacted, it didn't come about because of Muslims from Africa or the Middle East or Pakistanis or Bangladeshis or Algerians or Arabs. That's not why Brexit came about. For those who recall the events in the United Kingdom, when Schengen was signed, although the UK never became a full participant in Schengen, nonetheless, when Schengen was signed, there was a flood of Eastern Europeans who flooded through Western Europe and poured into the United Kingdom, especially from Poland, over 800,000 Poles in this country. And a lot of Brits, a lot of English didn't like that. They pushed into the hospitality sector and picked up a lot of jobs that either were vacant or were, I don't know, maybe Brits are unwilling to do it. I don't know. But the bottom line is there was a lot of tension for many, many years about the European Union and the flood of migrants coming into the United Kingdom, legal and otherwise. And that's what really drove the Brexit effort. It had nothing to do with all these other groups. But now here we find ourselves inside the United Kingdom where English are a minority almost everywhere I've been, certainly in the Midlands. You go to Leicester, you go to Birmingham, you go to Manchester, you go to all these towns, and English are a minority in their own country. It's not xenophobic, it's not racist to want to have your own homeland, to have your own place where you can celebrate, enjoy your culture, and not have other cultures foisted upon you. That doesn't make other cultures less worthy. It doesn't make them wrong. But I don't see settlements of millions of English living in Pakistan or living in Abuja. I don't see that. Folks from those places have those homelands they can go to. But when you become a minority in your own homeland and people insist that you adopt other laws and other norms that came from the place that was broken, that they migrated to your home, well, that's a whole different situation. And simply stating this doesn't make you a racist or bigot. It just makes you an honest commentator. And that lady obviously is from the political left in this country that is willing to give the country over to anybody and everybody. And of course, we'll hear the argument that England for a long time has been a land of immigrants. And that's true because it was uninhabited several thousand years ago between ice ages. And then Homo sapiens came back. In the Neolithic period, people were here, did amazing architectural constructs of Neolithic monuments and celestial things, and developed quite a culture. And then Celts came, and then Anglo-Saxons came, and then Vikings came, and lots of people have come. The Windrush era from the 1940s to the 1970s brought lots of people from the Caribbean, from the British Caribbean, into the United Kingdom, many of whom made great contributions to the United Kingdom. But they didn't overwhelm the country and make the majority population the minority in its own country. And I think it's a legitimate argument to have this conversation. And it says, again, it doesn't make you racist or bigot, it just makes you somebody who's pragmatic. I mean, the people who typically argue for these things are the ones that live in all white neighborhoods, or have a token Muslim neighbor or a token Nigerian neighbor. They're the ones that think it's all kumbaya. They're not the ones whose wages are driven down. They're not the ones who have to deal with a clog in the healthcare system, or have to deal with people living in better homes than they're living in because their taxes are paying for legal and illegal immigrants to live there because of the generosity of the people in the country. Now, this is a story that carries over elsewhere. It's the same thing happening in America now in many jurisdictions. And it's quite frankly wrong. It's wrong. If you immigrate legally to a country, you should do so because you want to contribute there. You want to pay taxes. You want to contribute to the social fabric of the country. You're welcome to bring your own unique cultural aspects of your society and your culture with you. That's how we got kindergarten in America. That's how we have cotillion in America. Those things brought from other cultures. In fact, we have many things in America that we've adopted from the Native American population that was there before Europeans arrived. Lots of things. In fact, many place names come from that, like Michigan, the Potomac, Chesapeake. These are all Native American names. And in many ways, America's been enriched by those people who were there for hundreds, thousands of years before Europeans arrived. But for England and the United Kingdom to be subjected to mass migration to swamp and overwhelm the population of the country, and then for people to be called bigots and racists simply because they have an objection to that, there's a serious problem with that. And to see a certain segment of British society that's to the left that by default calls anyone who even questions that or raises the topic a bigot or racist or gets hurty feelings, well, that's disheartening. Adults can have cogent conversations like I'm having right now without calling each other names. But free speech, it's on the wane. It's under assault by governments the world over. Thankfully, my government has retreated from that position. But that certainly was the norm under the Biden regime, censoring people whose opinions they disagreed with and going after them politically and financially, failing to renew or grant tax-exempt status to legitimate tax-exempt organizations in America. In Pennsylvania, taking our tax dollars and giving to people who shouldn't even be in the country, they're illegally. It's a disgrace. For those of us who follow the law and seek to achieve the American dream, or whatever country you're in, by adhering to the norms, mores, social values, and laws of your country, only to be overwhelmed by those who pour into your country at the behest, with the encouragement and facilitation of corrupt, evil governments. What say you folks? You can disagree. Call me what you want. I've said nothing against anybody here. Not singled anyone out by name, by culture, by faith, by skin pigmentation. Simply stating the obvious. If I'm a Botswana, who is a Mangwato, then I'd like to live around Mangwatos. I don't mind having the occasional neighbor who's an Afrikaner, or the occasional neighbor who's an Anglophone, or the occasional neighbor who's a Kalanga, or Basawa, San. But I should be allowed to live in my own homeland, around my own people, and not wake up one day and find myself a minority, being forced to adhere to the laws from countries that are broken, that people fled from and brought their broken ideas with them. It's kind of like Californians fleeing California for Idaho and Texas and bringing their dumbass ideas to Texas or Florida and destroying Texas and Florida like they destroyed California. What say you folks? Cheers.